Well, hi everyone. I'm Lori LeVay, and welcome to Dementia in the Arts. Today, our featured artist is Mark Timmons, and I can't wait to have our conversation with him. But before we talk with Mark, I'm just going to introduce myself briefly. Again, Lori LeVay. The reason Dementia in the Arts exists is because my mom lived with dementia for 30 years, and I stepped into this space in 2009 as a frustrated daughter and created Alzheimer Speaks to raise everyone's voice, especially those diagnosed with dementia and the family members, and to try to shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort. We do partner with Dementia Action Alliance, known as DAA, who has wonderful support programs. Very creative regarding people living with dementia, as well as Forget Me Not, which is a Facebook page created by Harry Urban, and Dementia Map, which is our global resource directory under Alzheimer Speaks. I'm going to have Mary Crescenzo, my co-host, introduce herself to you, and then we'll go to Mark and we'll get rolling with this program. Mary?
Good morning. Good morning. I am Mary Crescenzo, co-host of Dementia and the Arts. I am the author of The Planet Alzheimer's Guide, 8 Ways the Arts Can Transform the Life of Your Loved One and Your Own. I'm playwright of Planet A about the inner world of dementia. I'm a writer as well, poet as Mark is, and I'm also a public speaker, and I do workshops in self-care with creative writing for caregivers.
Great. Thanks, Mary. Mark, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Laurie, and I'm thrilled to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. So my name is Mark Timmons. I am a photographer, I'm a poet, and through my affiliation with the Dementia Action Alliance, I'm also a mentor and an advocate for people living with dementia, as well as the work I do outside of DAA for advocating for mental health and homelessness.
Okay, wonderful. Now, can you tell people, are you comfortable sharing when you got diagnosed and what type of diagnosis that you received?
Sure, I should have mentioned that. I was diagnosed 8 years ago at the age of 48. That time, my diagnosis was early onset dementia, most probably Alzheimer's type. Since then, by my count, I can remember my diagnosis having been changed at least 6 times.
Wow.
I tend to be a very complex case for the neurologists. So at this point, they're simply calling it mixed dementia until more symptoms, more evidence shows up so that they can narrow it down as to which type of dementia I'm dealing with.
You know, that seems to be a really common game that the physicians are playing these days. And I say playing a game because to family members and those diagnosed, that's what it feels like. It's like either give me a diagnosis or don't, or start out with that and educate people that this is a difficult thing to do. Because what I've seen from people is there's so much trauma wrapped every time the diagnosis changes. You know, you think you got it down and then you have to kind of re-research and stuff. And all that stress does not help, you know, when you're dealing with any form of dementia. I'd like to ask too, Mark, have you always been an artist, you know, all of your life, or is this something that, you know, you took up later on or really jumped into once your dementia diagnosis kicked in?
Well, with the photography, it was something I dabbled in for many, many years, but it was never anything I was serious about. Poetry came a little later. Poetry only came in the last couple of years. But what I found, what I discovered was happening with my brain change is that while the analytical side of my brain was suffering due to was becoming more and more compromised due to the dementia. the creative side of my brain sort of woke up, and found myself able to do more on the creative side of life. As my analytical skills deteriorated.
Okay. And do you mind also sharing what you did prior? I'm assuming, and maybe I'm incorrect in this, but I'm assuming that you don't work anymore. What kind of work you
That's
did prior?
correct. I don't work anymore. Prior to my diagnosis, I was a fiduciary tax accountant for one of the big four accounting firms. I handled a bank of accounts, somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 trust accounts that I maintained throughout the year for a bank, a customer of ours that was a bank, and was responsible for all the calculating the tax payments and processing the tax forms, whether they be trust accounts, estates, or charitable entities for this client.
So definitely hands-on and something that you really have to have straight focus for to meet all those government guidelines.
And that was how when I started to realize that something wasn't right in my brain was the sudden and quick deterioration of the quality of my work in the accounting field. Was kind of set off the alarm in my head that there was something not right going on in my head.
The idea of the mixed dementia diagnosis, I think that you're hearing more and more of that because I had heard when I was recently at the conference, the Alzheimer's Dementia, Alzheimer's Dementia International Conference. Esteemed doctors from all over the world, neuroscientists, et cetera, spoke, and they were saying that they were admittedly, that the diagnosis is often wrong.
Yeah.
And so you're putting somebody in a box of one sort of dementia. And so they are now leading themselves towards saying, let's do a mixed type of diagnosis, admit that basically they're not sure. Mm-hmm. So that is becoming more and more prominent, and only I think, to help the patient understand that they don't quite understand. And so therefore, how can we quite understand until they come closer to something for us instead of directing us in one way? Right. The other thing you mentioned was how the creativity started increasing. And I think the use of the amygdala, which is the emotional part of the brain, is a direct connection to the creative side of the brain. And often when the other areas are not functioning as well, that one kind of takes a bigger not front in the brain because it's not in the front, it's in the back, but takes a more prominent sense of what we are consciousness. And it allows for even more creativity for people who have never done any art at all, will find themselves creating, because indeed we all have that creative spirit in us, mm-hmm. but for whatever reason it's not there. So that, I think, is something else that I'm glad you mentioned, so people will understand that is an important part of looking towards a creative source for satisfaction, dignity, and self esteem.
And it's all about having a purpose, and that's something very important that we present to people in DAA is helping people living with dementia find a new purpose in life. And one thing I like to say, I do a lot of public speaking locally and with DAA, and one of the analogies I like to use when I talk is that the diagnosis of dementia wasn't the end of my story, and it's not necessarily the end of anybody's story. It's just the end of a chapter. So for my life, the chapter called Mark the Tax Accountant is over with. But I turn the page and there's more chapters to be written for my story. Mark the Photographer, Mark the Advocate, Mark the Poet. Those are still chapters that are waiting to be written, and these are areas where I find my purpose now, and we try to
Absolutely.
help other people find their purpose so that they can turn the page and continue to live well with dementia.
I
Thank you.
love that because I think so many times, like even when somebody retires, they don't know who they are anymore,
Mm.
and really saying, "Hey, this is just a chapter in your life." Flip the page, see what's next. What do you want to create? And you have a choice in what that's going to look like. And that's one of the fun things that Mary and I really enjoy in doing this program is seeing the creativity of what people can bring to the table, many times thinking it was never possible because they never saw themselves as a creative. And now there's this whole other piece that they didn't really even know existed or that they were capable of doing. And so often with dementia, you're told you're not capable to do this. And I really feel like our program helps bust that stigma and go, okay, you try this. Look at what
Right,
they're doing. It's pretty cool.
right.
you know,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so very fun. Now you said you kind of dabbled in photography originally. What does dabble mean to you? Because that means different things to different people.
When I got out of high school and took my first semester of college, I had a 1 semester course in photography. Um, that's really all the formal training I had in photography. Dabbling was, pick up a camera for a period of time, but then kind of get bored with it, or life gets in the way of frivolous hobbies, and so I'd have to put the camera away. And so I guess to answer your question, there wasn't a consistency with me with me in photography. It was just something I would do out of convenience when time allowed.
Okay. Well, I know we had like Gail Gregory on here, and she pretty much gets up every morning, goes for a walk, has her camera with her, and she just that's her routine. That's how she starts out a peaceful day, kind of in nature. Do you have a routine like that that you do?
Not like that anymore. No. Um, Unfortunately, I having some progression with my symptoms, and it's not always safe for me to leave the house on my own 2 feet by myself. I'm at risk for falling now. I do occasionally wander.
Mhm.
So I need to be more careful with leaving the house. That being said, if I'm going anywhere with a friend or that involves being outdoors, yeah, my camera is like another part of my body. I'll always have my camera with me.
Well, thanks for sharing that because I think it's really important for people to understand how you adapt, in life as symptoms change with that. I think what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to put up a PowerPoint, and then Mary and I will just ask you some questions about different
Sure.
pieces, and we'll go from there. So, Mary, do you want to start us off with this one?
I immediately feel peace when I look at this photograph.
Mhm.
And it's almost shot painterly, the way you use the light. For a minute, I thought this was a painting. And your technique in the photography just gives me both of those feelings. It's beautiful. The composition is beautiful. The balance, the light, uh, the angle of the light. I love this. Did you use a special kind of lens for this, or
No, no, it was a standard lens, Mary.
wow?
First of all, thank you for the compliments. Um, and you'll notice, or maybe I'm not sure if it's well represented in the shots I sent over to you, Laurie, but lighthouses are a magnet to me and my camera. Um, the logo for my photography gallery incorporates a lighthouse in it because um, to me, I call my photography Haven photography, or Haven gallery. A lighthouse is a haven during a storm for the boats. And I look at photography as my haven when I'm dealing with my dementia day in and day out. Um, I may forget people's names, forget people's faces, forget to turn the stove off. Yeah, I've done that a few times in the kitchen, but I can still can pick up my camera and know just how I need to set up the settings to get the shot that I'm looking for. I can still imagine a photograph without my camera by looking at it and with my own eyes and picturing what it would look like as a photograph. You mentioned the angles, Mary, and I think I did this with this photo. I'm not positive, but I'll tell when I have an opportunity to teach a little photography, if I'm out on a shoot for my own benefit, but somebody's with me to kind of take their own snapshots and keep me safe. The two lessons I try to get across to them is don't always have your camera here taking a picture. Change your angle, get down on your knees and angle your camera up. And don't forget every now and then stop the direction that you're walking and just turn around. And there might be a view of something from that angle that you're walking right past. So a lot of it is all about angles.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what the words you said about a haven, my first reaction, as I said, was peace. And without words, you're saying this, even though it almost looks like there's a storm perhaps coming in, that lighthouse just grounds me.
Mm-hmm.
And without words, and now with sharing the words on this, you've captured exactly what you said as you described it.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's interesting because as Mary was describing using her words, with the peacefulness, and you saying haven, to me what came was guidance, calmness, safety, not alone, comfort, which to me are all key things that people are looking for when they're dealing with dementia.
Absolutely.
And so, to me, it's kind of this pillar of strength, just, to bringing light to a dark situation, which is really pretty beautiful there in and of itself.
I know somebody's watching and they're saying, where is this? Can you tell us?
This is in Scituate, Massachusetts, not far from where I live. And that is Scituate Harbor, and that lighthouse is known as the Old Scituate Light.
And what type of camera do you use? So many people now are like, I just use my iPhone, type thing. But I know you have a real camera. So what type of camera do you use?
I use a Nikon DSLR. It's an older model, 3100 or 3200. I haven't outgrown its capabilities yet, so why put down the money to buy the new and brightest if this one is filling my needs just fine. I'd rather spend more money on quality lenses than upgrading the body of the camera.
Exactly. So here's a lighthouse again. Well, you want to tell us where this one is and what you were drawn to in this?
Before I moved here to Maine, I was living before I moved here to Massachusetts, I was living up in Maine, way up the coast of Maine, almost into Canada, in a little town called East Machias. And this lighthouse and the surrounding ground was my favorite go-to spot, my favorite haven. Whether it was for photography or just for peace of mind. And this lighthouse is called the West Quoddy Lighthouse, and it's in Lubec, Maine. It was put into service, I believe, in 1814 by President Jefferson. Um, and on the opposite side, that island you see in the background is actually part of Canada, part of New Brunswick. And opposite on another angle, opposite this lighthouse is the East Quaddy Lighthouse, and that one is on Campobello Island, which is a Canadian island. So the two of them are on either side of these narrows to protect the ships at night.
Mary, any comments from you on this one?
Well, you mentioned you're a poet, and each of your photographs that I've just seen have their own poetic stories. I mean, I want to know how you caught that. Is that a hawk or an eagle?
That is an eagle.
Were you standing there a long time, or was this?
That was pure luck. I knew there were eagles. I knew there were a few eagles' nests in that area, but that was pure luck that he was flying through the frame.
And then it also speaks of freedom,
Mm-hmm.
Freedom to create, freedom to be in this new chapter. It's just beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, I'm noticing something, like if you go to the lighthouse and if you go up from the bottom up to the third red stripe, and kind of the red in the water, there's something. Is that a buoy, an animal, or
that's a buoy?
It is. Okay. Yeah, it's very peaceful, and I love the softness, and yet the kind of stand tall, stand strong of the lighthouse with that, and then the whoosp of the eagle there. Let's see. Here's another one. This is absolutely gorgeous.
This photo I get the most. It's probably the one I'm most proud of in of my portfolio, and it does get a lot of comments. That's the same lighthouse as the last one we just looked at, the West Quaddy Lighthouse. The bright spot in the middle is a full moon.
Oh.
I was able to achieve this effect by attaching a star filter to the end of my lens, which takes any bright light source and creates the six-pointed star effect.
Okay.
Wow.
And that was, if you look down bottom right, you can sort of see the silhouette of a flag in motion. So to get this shot, it was at night. You can see stars behind the moon. I needed to set this up on a tripod for a long exposure. That one was probably a 30 or 40-second exposure to get this shot.
Wow, and the flag looks like it's in half mast, unless there's one behind it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That photo is from probably around 2017. So details like that, I don't recall anymore.
Okay. Beautiful.
Thank
Okay,
you.
let's go on to the next one here.
Oh, yes.
The cactus. So, you want to explain where you are with this one?
Sure. Before I moved to Maine, I had spent the prior 8 years living in Arizona. It was in Arizona at the Barrows Neurological Institute that I was initially diagnosed. So this is a cactus out in Arizona. But what's different about this photo is the background. That's not the background that was shot on the original photo. You mentioned we talked earlier about the gallery shows that I have. I have at least one gallery show a year. I always try to learn a new technique, incorporate a new technique each year. So, so I can have something new to talk about at the shows, but also it's to challenge my brain to learn something new, to keep the processes, the neurological processes going in my brain. So with this photo, I call this style of photography hybrid photography. I take a photo and alter it in editing by adding or deleting components of the photograph and replacing them with components that weren't there to begin with. And that fire sky background is something I added to the photo once I got it back into my editing program.
It's beautiful.
Very nice. Very nice. Two powerful images together. And this is the famous saguaro cacti, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
When you see in the desert, there's a barren area, but then it's like people. They remind me of people raising their arms up in the air to the sky. Just, it's beautiful and also powerful.
And a saguaro, if I'm saying that correctly, that large, it's extremely old. It's at least a couple of 100 years old.
And here's the next one, and you've overlaid one of your poems on this one. So why don't you tell us where this is and what this one's about?
This was taken down in the Outer Banks of North Carolina 2 years ago, almost to the day. 2 years ago, in an area called Jockey's Ridge, down on the Outer Banks. And like I mentioned with the last photograph, that always trying to learn something new and have something new to offer each year at my galleries. So 2 years ago, it was the start of that hybrid photography that I talked about. This year, for the first time, I learned how to superimpose excerpts from my poems onto my photographs. And this is an example of that. It's the entire poem is longer than that, but I did pull an excerpt from the poem, applied it to this photograph, and I'll hand it right now. They're being promoted as sort of a limited edition. I sign them and number them in the corner, and they've been quite popular.
Yeah, the scenery is beautiful, and the poem, for those that may be listening on a podcast, I'll just read this quick. It's titled "The Gentle Winds." Through an open window I fly, holding hands with the wind, pulled up to the sky. The wind, she takes me to where I long to be. She knows the way to the edge of the sea. With a gentle draft, she sets me down, alone on a beach that has yet to be found. Sand warm and soft, sparkling like diamonds, ocean stretching out well past the horizon. It's just beautiful. It's a calming, beautiful, relaxing picture, but I could just almost feel, the breeze, as I was reading that, and the comfort of that, being kind of whisked away to someplace safe and alone, where, the rest of the crazy world wasn't bombarding me. And so just beautiful. Mary, comments on this one?
Yeah, I agree with all that you're saying. And the use of putting two different arts together is known as mixed media. And it's a beautiful combination of the two. That was a beautiful reading, by the way, Lori.
Oh,
very nice. I keep using the word beautiful, but it's so apt here. I love it. Composition, the feeling, it's lovely.
One of the things too that stuck out with me too is, you've got this white beach sand, and some of it is smooth, and then you see the footprints. But what my eyes are really drawn to is the fence.
The fence, yep.
Because everything else is calm and smooth, and then you have this rigid, fence, and yet it's see-through, and it's, you can tell it's been there a while. It kind of ebbs and flows and stuff, but to me, it's just there's that contrast. Then it rolls into the sky that again is soft and comforting. So and the reflection from the sky onto the lake. I mean, there's just so many details that I get captured by when I take the time to be still and really look. And I think sometimes we just don't take the time to see what's before us. So I really appreciate someone with talent who can capture this.
Thank you. I'm glad you spoke about the fence, because seeing the condition of the fence, and knowing the storms that the Outer Banks are always subject to every year, and you come to realize just how much that fence has witnessed over the years. Mm-hmm. Even though everything's calm right now, that fence knows the history of that area when it comes to the storms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The engagement that we're doing right now, talking about your work, talking about the poem, talking about what we see. When I work with people with various stages of dementia, and I say I'm going to work with poetry, I'm often asked, well, how are you going to do that? And one way is to read a poem to someone and to feel their reaction, get their reaction, to have them look at a photograph or a painting and say, what do you see? And whatever they bring to that, we all see things differently, then that's a way to start a conversation. Mm-hmm. So that's how poetry can work. And also, if you can write poetry with dementia, having dementia, it's another way to create. But even if you can't, you can react to it. You can respond to the arts. And that's another form of arts engagement.
Little bit off on a tangent. I host a group every couple of weeks for DAA. Before I was hosting it, it was called the Poetry Club. Now that I'm hosting it, it's called the Literature and Art Group. And exactly what you were saying, we'll look at a piece of art. Last time we met, we were taking a look at and discussing Edvard Munch's The Scream. And so we spent an hour discussing it. Now, in the meantime, between then and when we meet again tomorrow, people will write either a short story based upon how they're interpreting what's happening in The Scream, or if they're inspired to write some lines of poetry, they can bring that to our group on Thursdays. And again, it's designed to engage people, and get their brains, challenging their brains to keep processing and to keep working, despite their diagnoses.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I think too, with dementia, people learn to adapt, and some people might not be able to write sentences or full prose. They might do, haikus that are shorter, or they might just have words. And when they read those words, there's power behind those individual words. And so, there's no limit in terms of how you can express things. This one I love. I just love the face of this bird. Like, what do you want now?
Actually, you should have seen the uncropped image of that bird, because there is a very dead, very bloodied fish in front of him. I was assuming it was his fish, and that look on his face, like, I dare you to try to take that fish from me.
That's great.
Mary, any comments on this?
Oh, no, it's funny. It's expressive. We can read into it. And I love the lines of the waves behind him that coming in, and the shadow. Yeah, it's very, very evocative. It speaks. Yep. Don't touch it. Yep. Whatever it is, don't touch it.
Well, and when I was looking at the waves, a lot of times we see these big, huge waves that you can see through. And these are more condensed and darker. And, at first it's like, God, it almost looks like a jellyfish type quality, with the sparkle and stuff on it. But I find that really interesting too, because everything takes a different shape there. Now here's another beautiful, beautiful shot. Whereabouts is this one, Mark?
That is the Boston skyline that taken from across the way in a town called Hull.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you notice the big robot-looking structure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, growing up, we always would call it the robot. That's the air traffic control tower for Logan Airport,
Oh, okay. Okay.
and kind a little bit more difficult to see. But if you go to the right, it, um, okay, you see that in the water, there's a few buoys.
Mm-hmm.
If you look above one of the buoys, you can just make out um, a bridge, like the trellis of a bridge, and that is the Mystic Tobin Bridge in Boston.
This is the view of Boston you hardly ever see, so I like that.
Yeah, a lot of people like to go down to this spot in Hull um, because of these sunsets. They can be so amazing. And I was with someone, and we were coming home from spending an afternoon in Hull when I saw some cars pulled over, just on the side of the road, not in a parking spot. So, like I mentioned earlier, caused me to kind of turn around, look over my shoulder to see what they were looking at. Saw this sunset, and I was just like, stop the car. I need to get this picture. I didn't even get out of the car. All I had to do was lean out the window with my camera to get this shot.
It's awesome. Patience. The beautiful and the enduring are nurtured over weeks, months, years. From nature to relationship, time spent endears. A piece of jagged glass must tumble o'er and o'er in the sea to become a piece of lovely sea glass an artist's eyes can see. The couple at the beach, waiting on the colors of the setting sun, sit quietly as time passes, knowing its value when the day is done. Flowers do not bloom o'ernight, nor wisdom come from youth. With time, the garden is a beautiful sight, and to the elder comes the truth.
Beautiful. Now, Mark, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, this kind of is this, I'm assuming this is a sunset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you alter the colors at all, or is this all natural?
Unless there was the cactus photo I altered. Um, I try not to have to alter the actual colors. I may tweak the brightness or the contrast a little bit on them, but I really, because you do face, as a photographer, I do face that skepticism sometimes. Oh, this is AI, or oh, what did you obviously had to do something with the colors. So I like to be able to say, with honesty, that no, I really didn't do anything with the colors except tweak the brightness or the contrast a little bit.
Okay. Well, and I love the title to this poem, The Patience, because it does, when you're patient, you see so much more. You take
Mm-hmm.
so much more in just terms of looking, ahead. And there is a variety of detail from, the ripples on the lake or the river, whichever this is, the bridge, the siloed buildings, the tree line, the buoys, the clouds, the lighting. I mean, there's just so much in here when you're patient. So it's a beautiful match. So thank you.
Thank you.
Here's another one, and I loved this one. This one, again, for anyone listening to the podcast, you probably want to come back and watch the video here. But it's just set in this beautiful colored foliage, and then it's a kind of an old fallen leaf with a heart cut out of it, by nature. And it's pretty profound the way it pops. So tell us a little bit more about this one, Mark.
Sure. So I do have an affinity for lighthouses.
Mm-hmm.
I also have just kind of an ongoing project that I'm always on the lookout for what I call hearts in nature. I've found rocks like boulders. I have a picture of a boulder with a heart-shaped, naturally cut into it. This leaf is another example. I was on a nature trail during the fall, so got the beautiful fall colors and some with a couple of leaves that haven't quite turned yet, and this old dead leaf sitting on top of the foliage, uh, with the natural shape of a heart carved out of the middle of it. So
yeah, it's beautiful.
The colors are dynamic, and I love the little dewdrop on the leaf, or maybe it's water from rain or something, which just adds to it. It's quite brilliant, and it's also peaceful though.
mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, this and I didn't really notice the dewdrop on there until you mentioned that, and then it's like, oh yeah, I can see that. I can see some other kind of dewy areas as well. When I am patient and take the time to look. So it's always neat to have this. One side of me almost says, oh, this would be a cool one to title, The Heart of Nature or Hearts in Nature, something like that, because there are probably a lot of people that wouldn't pick that up, and yet I think it's so important that they see the natural beauty and the love within, that again sometimes is overlooked. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now here we've got another beautiful, beautiful setting. Whereabouts does this one take place?
Where was that one? Oh, okay. That was back when I was living in Maine, and that's a section of Acadia National Park.
Mary, you want to comment on the photo and the poetry?
I love the two together. I've been to Arcadia. It's just a wonderful, beautiful place. I love this.
Yeah. So the poem on this one says, let's take a walk along a distant shore, far away from distractions, where we are free to explore. Let's take a walk hand in hand, speaking aloud our inner thoughts so our hearts will understand. Let's take a walk, stopping only for a kiss, appreciating the magic that between us exists. How gorgeous is that? I'm getting emotional on that one. It's beautiful. And you look at the scene and you have, I love the rocks, on the shoreline, and there's just so much texture in this one. You've got the clear blue sky with just a few little clouds in there. You have the wooded area on the other shoreline that you can see, a beach and a few houses. But then you have these, pine, I don't know if they're pine trees, and, that are just thick, and some of them don't necessarily look overly healthy or strong, but together they just stand out, and it's such a gorgeous scene, and it just reminds me, and again through your verbiage, of all that life has to offer, and some of it is smooth and some of it is ragged and jaggedy, but together we get through, and beautiful.
Thank you.
It makes me think of again the idea of storytelling. Just by looking at this, we can imagine. Your poem enhances the story for us, but if you're listening and you're saying, well, I'm a caregiver, a person I'm working with dementia, can't do photography, or I don't have the supplies or whatever, open a book of photography and just say, what do you see? And stories will emerge, no matter if they're abstract, if they make sense to you or not. Everyone can react and share what they see, and that in itself is such a beautiful way to connect and communicate. Like right now, we're all looking at this and we're thinking our own thoughts. It doesn't take a lot to get our self-expression up and running. This is one way to do it.
And you'll probably noticed that a lot of the metaphors I use in my poetry has to do with that connection to the sea, oceans, boats. And then just a quick commentary on my poetry in general. With a few exceptions, most of my poems have two inspirations. One, especially this one, was a woman that was in my life for a while, but sad to say is we've gone our separate ways. And then I'm also inspired to write about my son who passed away next month, or September. It'll be 2 years ago that my youngest son passed away from mental illness, and I've written several poems to and about him, just as a way to help process the grief.
Wonderful. And we'll get to some of those poems here shortly. This one I love, especially with the 4th of July. This one, is just roasting a marshmallow over the fire. It looks like a young gal,
Yep.
stick with the marshmallow. You don't see the face. You don't, you just focus, or I focus on the fire and the marshmallow and those kind of, I say anxious hands awaiting the treat. What was your thought in capturing this one, Mark?
I do not like portrait photography in general. Back in those days that I was dabbling, Laurie and Mary, I did offer my services as a portrait photographer, and it just really disheartened me and had made me put my camera down and leave it put away for many years, because you can never please the entire group when you're taking pictures of a group at a family reunion, let's say, or a wedding, let's say, because there's always, oh, little Tommy had a funny look on his face. Well, I can't control that. So if I take pictures of people, they tend to be more candid, like they weren't expecting me to take a photo, and I'm able to get more natural expressions. This photograph, that little girl is now a teenager. I'm very close to their family up in New Hampshire, and her name is Zoe. And this was just outside. I hadn't seen the family for many, many years after I moved to Arizona. So when I moved back to New England, this was one of the first times I had reconnected with this family, and we had a little bonfire going outside and toasting marshmallows. So I stood in front of her and snapped this picture, because I could see how the flames, how you could see through the flames, and I thought this would be a really cool perspective if I could pull it off.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Mary, thoughts?
Yeah, it's a unique shot. The fact that the flames are transparent is just very gripping to me. I love the angles, the fact that some of it is not in focus. This is just a unique perspective on just an everyday thing that people do. And the colors, I really like it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And that's another one where I took the camera at a different angle, down low, looking up.
And this one I just am in awe of. Do you want to explain this one?
This is one that when I have it up displayed in a gallery, people find it hard to believe that I didn't alter.
Mm-hmm.
This was how it looked shot through the camera. That is the Grand Prismatic Spring at Yellowstone National Park. And those are the colors that you see from time to time. It's all because of all the sulfur and other chemicals that are naturally in these hot springs. From day to day, you're going to get different expressions of different colors. And when this was shot when I decided to move back to New England from Arizona, it was a direct result of getting my diagnosis and suddenly feeling like I needed to come home, and New England was home. Um, so, sold most of my possessions. I was driving a pickup truck. So it was just me, my dog in the passenger seat, and what I could, black Labrador, and what I could fit in the back of a pickup truck. And we drove cross country, um, tent camping in national parks all the way back to New England. And this was one of our first stops was Yellowstone. And in preparing to visit Yellowstone, everybody talks about Old Faithful. They want to see Old Faithful. When I was doing my research on what I wanted to see at Yellowstone, I kind of said, the heck with seeing a geyser going off every hour. I want to see the Grand Prismatic Spring.
Mm-hmm.
And I took several photographs from different locations all around the Grand Prismatic Spring, and it was breathtaking.
Wow. Yes, the reflection. What time of day was this?
Oh,
It looks like dawn or dusk.
it was early morning.
Early morning.
Early
Yeah.
morning, yeah.
Thank you for telling me about the Grand Prismatic Spring because I've been to Yellowstone. I didn't even know about it. And
Oh, wow.
of course, I went to see the guys. This was many years ago. But I'm planning to go back again with my husband. This is going to be on the top of my list because this is just so dynamic and mysterious and beautiful.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it really is. The colors are just so intriguing, with the ground, and then you've got the yellow and the green and kind of this misty fog and the tree line in the back, and yeah, it's really something.
And I've got, and that just happens to be what the colors look like from that angle.
Mm-hmm.
A little ways down the dock that you have to walk along. Um, I turned again to get a picture of it, and now the colors had more magentas and reds in them.
Mm-hmm.
So it took my
It,
breath away that whole spring.
it
Yeah.
kind of reminds me in a way of the Northern Lights.
Hmm.
And I love the silhouette of the mountain in the background. And yet in the reflection, it's not in silhouette. You see the colors on it. It's really again a unique shot of an area that perhaps people don't often see.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Here's another one, and I thought this was really cool too. You want to explain where this is?
That is in Lincoln, New Hampshire, from 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And another um, perspective that I'm always on the lookout for is photographs of perfect reflections. So I took this shot because I saw how the reflection of the windmill, not the water wheel, looked in the water. Um,
What's mysterious about this is that you've got the symmetry of the reflection. It's as if you could cut it in half, like a Rorschach almost. But I'm looking at the flowers in the lower left and I'm thinking, wait a minute, I don't see those above. How come they're not also? I'm realizing that it's only in the picture, of course, near the water. But my mind wants to see a total reflection of everything, and I like that.
I was
Yeah.
trying to think uh, what that location is all about. There's a tourist attraction called Franconia Notch, and that's where this was located near, where the old man of the mountain used to be until that rock face formation collapsed.
Okay. Yeah, I love the red against the shed kind of there in the background. of this, water wheel, and then it's muted in the water, but yet it's so exacting. And, I just look at even the spokes inside the wheel, very different in the water than I see on land, in terms of how I interpret how it would, you know, how it would run. Um, so yeah, and I too I like the contrast with the flowers and the greenery as well. This one I just love the puff dead dandelions, and flowers here. So every time I see those, I just want to blow on them and make them, poof all over. Where was this, and what made you decide to capture this one?
That was on a local trail here in my town. And this is a different style of photography. I do a lot of landscapes. I do the lighthouses. But with this shot, I was working with macro photography, which requires a different way of thinking. So again, I'm challenging my brain to think a different way because you need to control your depth of field, meaning purposely making the background out of focus like I did, so that you're only focusing on the dandelion head. Otherwise, had I left everything in focus, in my opinion, really would have lost the dandelion, because you've got the dominating greens and yellows in the background. And to achieve that effect, you control depth of field through your lens with specific aperture settings for your lens, combined with the shutter speed. So a lot of calculation has to go into it, which when you're dealing with an inanimate subject matter, I can take the time to figure out, okay, what's the best way to set my aperture to get this desired effect.
It's interesting for me too, is when I look at this, my eyes always kind of go right to left, and it just pulls my eye right over. And I find it interesting that you offset it to the side versus centering it, because a lot of people would have just centered it. And was that purposeful, or is that just the way the picture you took?
No, that was purposeful. I have another shot of this same subject where I did perfectly center it. And in photography, they have a concept called the rule of eights, and it dividing up the frame into 8 segments. Oftentimes when I'm out there with my camera, I always feel that those rules are made to be broken. So I'll often do something like that, against the norm, against the expected. And sometimes I like the results, sometimes I don't.
So technically, I'm guessing when you started photography back in, I guess you said high school, was it?
First semester of college.
College. Was there digital photography, or did you actually do the dipping of the pictures in the dark room? And now I'm guessing you're working all digitally?
Correct.
Okay.
For a little while, when I lived in New Hampshire, shortly after I got married, I was working at a 1-hour photo lab, and through the customers there, the regulars, I was able to get a job we had a small weekly newspaper, and I could take my own photos and submit them as a freelance photographer, to get byline credit underneath the photo in the weekly newspaper. But that opened the door for them to hire me on as their darkroom person. So it was like every Sunday morning I'd drive over to their darkroom and collect all the rolls of film that their staff photographers had shot during the week, and dipping and yeah, all of doing all of that to process their photos. And it's funny, that was 1989, 1990, thereabouts. And when I talk about that, I still swear I can smell those chemicals.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I took a class or two in that setting, and it wasn't easy. It's a lot of steps. Not that digital photography, in a creative sense, is not various steps, as you mentioned, different apertures, etc., but such a different world than we live in now.
And it's much more comforting now, because I'm showing you today some of the highlights of the shots I like, but there's lots and lots of mistakes I've made, photos that just don't come out right, and um, a lot of times that's kind of due to my state of mind that day with my symptoms. But what's nice about digital is I don't have to wait till the film gets developed to see if I had a problem shooting that subject.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there in the
Exactly.
back of my camera. And because it's all digital now, I can shoot 7, 8, 9, 10 photos at different settings of the same subject to make sure that one of them is going to be the right one.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Great.
Ansel Adams had well, probably had lots of quotes, but there's one quote by Ansel Adams that always encourages me when I start to get frustrated by, going through a stretch where I don't get any quality images. He once said that his goal when he was taken, everybody, you both remember who Ansel Adams was before I?
Yes.
Okay.
Famous
So,
nature
right. So he always said that his goal was to shoot one marketable photo every month. Just one.
Wow.
He could take hundreds of photos, but he was only looking for that one every month that would be good enough to market. And so I try to tell myself, if that was good enough for Ansel Adams, then stop getting so worked up over 20 photos on this photo shoot that didn't come out right.
Yep. Good advice.
Yeah, very. This one is cool too. So why don't you explain this one?
This is hybrid photography. The moon was not there. I added the moon, and yeah, I added the yellow as well. The subject is the Troga, Troga pinnacles in near Death Valley, California. A lot of commercials for like your off-road cars riding around. It's to show everybody on TV just how versatile they are and how powerful they are. They videotape a lot of these car commercials here in the Pinnacles, and I was there. See, I was still living in Arizona, so that was taken probably around 2014 or 2015, and there wasn't a lot to this photo when I got it home to looking at it on my computer. So rather than chalk it up to a bad photo and a throwaway, and I decided, well, see how I can manipulate it, see what I can, do with my hybrid photography and try to create something unique, something one of a kind. And this was the result for that one.
Otherworldly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the contrast with the yellow, and the moon, just is intriguing in sitting there. And then you see the sunlight coming through the clouds, and then you have the starkness and the heaviness of just the rock in the formation, in and of itself there. Here's another one. It looks like you did a hybrid. You want to
Yep.
explain this one?
The only piece of that photo that was in the original is that tree.
Okay.
The planets were added, the sky was replaced, and yeah, I wanted to create something that was otherworldly.
Hmm.
I can imagine that's the planet Jupiter. So I can imagine standing on one of the moons of Jupiter, looking up at the sky, and this being what I see in the sky.
Okay. Thoughts, Mary?
Also very painterly as well.
Hmm.
I like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it reminds me of something out of a sci-fi movie, where the aliens are coming, and the sky's changing. That's what it makes me think of. Okay, now here's another one with a beautiful, beautiful poem on it. This one says, with each sun that rises, hope is renewed. Hearts are awakened and thoughts are construed. With each sun that rises, dreams are reviewed. Gratitude is acknowledged and goals are pursued. And this is just like the dawning of a new day. Like, don't give up no matter how bad things are. There's beauty to behold. There is always hope in the horizon. And, to me, it's just a real powerful statement of don't ever let go of that hope and those dreams. When you captured this, what were your thoughts, Mark?
That's one of the oldest photos I have in my portfolio. Was never actually in my portfolio. It was just kind of one that I threw aside.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, it was taken in Arizona, in the town that I lived in Prescott, Arizona, about 2013, I would guess. Now, this process that I've started doing this year with adding my poetry to the photos, um, I've kind of taken the approach in two different ways. I have quite a collection of poems that I've written over the last year, and so on the one hand, I look at photos that I have that have enough blank space in them, like this photo here. The sky takes up a lot of the photograph, so there was a lot of room to work with as far as superimposing a poem. So that's one of the considerations I have for when I'm looking for photographs to put a poem on. And I'm at the same time checking the poems that I previously wrote to see if there's one that kind of makes sense to match with this photo.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, and this why I'm explaining this now is this is an example of a different approach. Um, Again, this photo has quite a bit of dead space in the sky, the sky taking up 2/3 of the photograph. But I really couldn't find a poem that I wanted to add to it that I had already written. So I took time to be inspired by the image itself to create something just for that image. And that's what this 4-line poem isn't in my collection of poems. It was something that I wrote just for this photograph.
Mary?
It's I love the choice of the yellow in the writing because it's as if the sun is projecting these words in the color of the sun.
Hmm.
And that just makes me feel like it's a beam of message from the sun.
Yeah, yeah, I see that. Almost makes me wish now that maybe I could have centered the poem more over the sun so that you'd have more of that direct effect of the sun's rays giving off that poem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would like to say I like it like this because you've got the diagonal, the visual diagonal from the upper left to the lower right, and the poem helps us to see that, to move
Okay.
there. So, yeah, it's mysterious in that sense, as opposed to like just what might be more realistic. So I like it this way, but then
Okay.
again, you know, you're the artist, but
But
everyone sees it differently. But
but it,
this is, yeah, this
but it
is,
wasn't one of my favorite photos either. I really had nothing. This photo wasn't included in any of my shows until I found something to write to put with it.
Mm-hmm.
You
so
take
it
that
works.
away, and it's just one of hundreds of sunrise or sunset photos that I have.
And it works both ways. You can write a poem and then make a painting or a drawing or a picture that reflects it if you choose, or you could have a picture or a photograph and write to it. Another way to creatively go a different direction.
This one I just love. It's a watering can, with wildflowers in it, and it's just these bright colors, but it's just, it just screams spring. And then it looks like a little bird's nest on
Mhm.
the table that's sitting next to it, and kind of um, a weathered wood kind of shingle, almost like cedar. It looks like on there. It just, and then the window, but it's just this. It's just beautiful to me. It's a really really peaceful, calming shot, and full of hope as well with that.
And curious touches. One of the shingles is off on one side,
Oh
that
yeah,
one white spot. The window is not looking in a window, it's a reflection, I'm guessing, of what's outside.
yeah.
And then that little nest, I mean, I want to guess that that's a hummingbird nest. It's so small.
You're
But
probably right.
so there's these, I agree with you, Lori, it's so beautiful and bright. And then there's these little touches that make me curious about what are those and why.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll recall the photograph of the young girl with the toasting the marshmallow. This is the same house. Different time. After my son passed away, my friend who lives in this house up in New Hampshire drove down. She's been friends with this family for close to 40 years. So they're like a brother and sister to me more than friends. And she's the wife, um, is godmother to all of my children, including the one that passed. When I called her, she was my first call after finding out the news, and she drove down and immediately drove down, picked me up, and brought me back so that I could be around support. Um, I had an old friend because I used to live in that town. So while I was there, another old friend wanted to come over and sit with me and offer condolences and all that. Well, when we used to hang around back in the 90s, this friend, one of the things we liked to do was go to a local nursery and just walk through the greenhouses and admire the different plants and the flowers. So she took it upon herself to pick up a bouquet of wildflowers to remind me of that time in our lives. And my friend that lives in that house just happened to have a watering can sitting on the table. So she's the friend that brought the flowers said, "Oh, perfect," and she just dropped them in. And I'm just this, and so I've had this in my show and in my portfolio for you know a year and a half now, and I've been floored by just how popular it seems to be. I've sold several greeting cards with this image on it. I've sold different sizes, matted photos with this image on it, and it's like, oh, I just wanted it in there because it kind of was a subtle reminder about my son, but other people really like it.
Yeah, but to me, it represents how life we can feel weathered, kind of like the siding. You can see the paint or the stain that is chipped off, and yet the beauty of nature that is abound. And like Mary said, with the window, it's kind of tilted out, so it really is reflective of, what we don't see, with all this foliage and the tree leaves and things like that. So it's very interesting. But to me, it all balances out, and again, it's hopeful and joyful. That just because something has rough edges doesn't mean that there's not beauty in it, and that it's not, can't be surrounded and be part of that. I think sometimes, especially nowadays, everybody's looking for everything to be perfect, and perfect loses a lot of depth in terms of reality, in my personal opinion. And so I really appreciate all the different factors that are in here. So thank you again.
This isn't, it's for me, as you tell the story, it's an emotional type of feeling for me. Something's missing on the home, the piece of shingle. The nest is empty, and yet nature sustains, and it sustains us in its beauty and comforts us.
That's nice.
Now this one's interesting because it's very different. It's not out in nature. It's stark black, but a picture of a city with its lights on. So why don't you talk about this one and why you captured this, what you were drawn to?
This is in Boston. That is the State Street Bank building. I used to work for State Street Bank for a couple of years. What's amazing about this shot is, to me anyways, is that where I was situated was miles away. I'm walking, it was at night, obviously, and I'm walking to a car. I had gone to an exhibit, a Van Gogh exhibit in Boston with a friend, and we're walking to the car, and it caught my eye for a minute, and I had to kind of backtrack a couple of steps because I could only see this shot. Like I said, it was several miles away and through in between buildings that were closer to me. So it was a very narrow shot for me to take. So I did the best I could on the fly. I took a quick photograph of it, and when I got home, I was able to crop the two buildings that were in the foreground out of the photograph, and then really zoom in, crop and zoom to capture this nighttime city scene.
I love it. It's like as if it's floating in darkness. And I see, like, on the left-hand side, well, on one of the sides, I see like a man made of dots, like a robot, a little man who's kind of standing there with his arms out to the side, like just a person in that. Does anybody see that?
I say one that reminds me of like a Pac-Man type person, but I'm not
I see a head and a whole body, and his like long arms, as if his forearms are hanging. And
oh yeah, I see it now.
see him? He's standing.
Interesting. Yeah, I like the different colors, of the windows, the bright white, and then you've got, kind of this muted yellow, and there's blue, and there's red, and some are squares, some are circles. It's just really, it's interesting, kind of hit and miss. But that something substantial is standing in the darkness, even though you can't see it all. Now, here is one of your poems, A Brief Ode to New Life. Is this one that you'd like to read, or?
Sure. So recently a friend of mine became a grandmother again, and she put on social media the photo of her holding the newborn, for the first time, and the smile on my friend's face just really inspired me to write this poem. It's called A Brief Ode to New Life. Once upon a day when the sunlight's end came early, a new soul decides to begin his outward journey. He announces his arrival with cries of victory, ready to add his name to his family tree and future history. Loved ones feeling love deeply and profound, their hearts overflowing with warmth that knows no bounds. That love and warmth shines through the smiles on their faces as they hold him, swaddle him, shower him with praises. His proud mother lays in bed, weary from her task. Though thoroughly exhausted, her joy cannot be masked. His proud father sits beside the two, attentive with his love, a family's newborn, firstborn child, the start of what dreams are made of.
Wow.
I like that a lot.
Thank you.
I have two new grandchildren, so I really can understand that. Very nice.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's like any parent or grandparents gets that. Someone who hasn't experienced either of those might not to the same extent. But you describe it beautifully. Just very sweet.
Thank
Very
you.
sweet. Now here's one.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A violin speaks.
Mm-hmm.
Gives me chills. Backstory. Time to tell a story. My son was a child prodigy. Extremely gifted intellectually, while also extremely gifted musically. And while he could play, you hand him any instrument, and within 10 or 15 minutes, he figured out how to play it. His instrument of choice was the violin. And once he became an adult, he chose to live a life on the streets, a life on the road. And that was his, due to his mental illness. But he always had his violin with him, unless it got stolen, and then I'd find a way to get him money so he could buy a new one. But he always had his violin with him, and I imagined, as a way of processing the grief I felt on that day, April 9th, 2023, when I wrote this poem, because grief isn't a linear process. It doesn't go from A to Z and then you're done. It ebbs and flows always. And especially losing a child, you don't get over it. It's just something you need to learn how to sit beside that grief. But there are going to be days when you feel like you're drowning in the grief again. And on April 9th, 2023, I found myself in a vulnerable state. But instead of expressing my emotions in first person, I thought to ascribe those emotions and those feelings to my son Joey's violin, because the violin was the closest Joey had to a companion in his adult life, his brief adult life. So a violin speaks. Standing alone, leaning, propped up against the wall, my voice now silent when it once filled the hall. Waiting for my ally, my friend who made me sing, the one whose fingers held my bow, whose fingers touched my strings. Beautiful music we made together, but alas, never again I fear, for so much time has passed. My strings and body gathering dust with each passing day. Where has he gone? Why won't he take me out to play? So many travels, so many adventures, the two of us entwined. Hiking, walking, riding the rails, it was forever he and I. I was with him as he grew in talent and in age. I gave him confidence when he took any stage. I miss my boy. I wonder where and why he's gone. and why this time he didn't take me along. No one else will hold me the way that he did. Without him, I can't sing or live. Instead, I only exist in silent torture, missing my boy, my love, my brilliant performer. So, yeah, so that's his violin speaking as an outlet for what I was feeling.
I said, well, I sure felt it. I'm got tears just streaming down my face. It's beautiful. It's so powerful and loving and asking of the questions of why is life like this? You know, what happened? And so often we don't have the answers.
If I can digress for a minute, the last time I spoke with Joey was 6 days before his suicide, and he had called me from the road. Like he always kept in touch. He just never wanted to be under a roof for any length of time. So he had called me 6 days before, and the one thing I remember observing in that phone call, he was so crystal clear. Joey was a schizophrenic, untreated schizophrenic, with addiction problems. So, but that last phone call, it was old Joey. He was sober. Um, there were no voices in his head going on. He was very coherent, and it was a really encouraging conversation that I had with him. And um, I had actually just started into that relationship with that woman that I'm no longer in a relationship with, and was exuberantly telling Joey about this new woman in my life. And 6 days before he takes his own life, he's telling me, Dad, I haven't heard you this happy in so many years. He says, I can't wait to meet her. And at least the last thing we said to each other was I love you. And that was a regular thing. We would always end our phone calls with I love you. But 6 days before, he's talking about looking forward to meeting this new woman in my life, to deciding to take his own life. And I'm forever left wondering what happened in those 6 days, and why didn't he call me? Because whenever his mental illness would start to overwhelm him, he would call me, and we'd talk, and I talk him, till he calmed down, and so I'm left wondering to myself, first off, what happened in those 6 days, and then it's Joey, why didn't you call me? I would move mountains if you needed help.
This is, first of all, thank you, Mark, for sharing this very intimate and profound poem with us. Grief is something that we all find at times in our lives we have to face. And I really like your concept of we must sit beside it. We can't get through it. We find a way to sit beside it. And writing or even painting or any other art is also a way to deal with grief. And you handle this so specifically, giving the violin voice, personifying the violin, but also in a way it's a persona poem, giving yourself voice to him and to the circumstance. Just by separating yourself enough, you were able, it seems to me, to be able to put these emotions and this longing and these questions in the voice of the violin, his most closest living thing, because instruments are living things. Mm-hmm. And I know that you've helped anyone watching, listening, who has had a moment of grief, a lifetime of remembrance, through this poem, through tears that may have brought to their eyes, and also the fact that they can also use writing to help to cope and sit beside this grief. Thank you so much for reading this and for writing this.
It's because of Joey and because of Joey mainly that I've started advocating for mental health and homelessness in addition to dementia.
Good for you.
And I try to, after Joey passed away, I did enter a dark space in my head for a while, and I got help and learned many coping skills. And in our groups with DAA, although we try to be narrowly focused on dementia issues, I often try to incorporate mental health messages in the discussions as well. Talk about one thing I learned in my own therapy program was keeping a toolbox, a mental toolbox of different tools, different coping skills, so that when you do all of a sudden feel the grief again, you've got things you can reach for. You've got tools in that toolbox that you can try to use to address it. And okay, maybe you pull a mental health tool out of the toolbox that really doesn't help the situation. Well, all right, put that one back in the toolbox and pull something else out. It's a matter of filling that toolbox with options, so that you can restore your own mental health.
That's wise. And, it's on the rise at all ages. Mental health, needs to be addressed. It makes me think of a piece that I bought at a silent auction that was sketched by a homeless person.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of the most profound sketches I've seen of Mother Teresa. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And it was sad because, I'm like, who was the artist? And then to hear, it was just like, oh my gosh, this talent, and I always think, and I could be wrong, but I think so much of the time with mental illness, I think people don't feel valued.
Mm-hmm.
They don't feel like they fit in. And I'm like, oh my, this should, his work should be on exhibit. I mean, the talent here is off the charts. And yet it's not recognized all the time with people.
And people need to realize that, there is a connection. When someone is diagnosed with a mental illness by their early 20s, they are 4 times more likely to develop dementia in middle age. If that diagnosis of mental illness is a type of schizophrenia that they're diagnosed with, then those statistics jump to 6 times more likely to develop dementia.
Wow.
So, so while we can't cure dementia, we can treat mental health.
Yep.
And mental illness. And that would go a long ways toward curtailing, the number of people diagnosed with dementia later in life.
Interesting. We've got, here's another one of your poems about Joey. Do you want to read this one?
This was the first one I wrote after, I actually wrote this while I was in therapy after Joey died. Everybody loved his blue eyes. Everyone would say, I've never seen anybody with eyes as blue as his. And I always had in my head, I could see there was a comparison in my head to the lyrics of the song Vincent by Don McLean that he wrote about Vincent van Gogh.
Yes.
And so, eyes of China blue. My son had eyes of China blue. My son, because of his lifestyle living on the streets, he had raggedy clothes. They were both Van Gogh and my son, different mediums, but they were both artists. So this poem really, when I sat down and said I need to get this poem out, it was the only poem so far that I actually wrote nonstop. I wrote the whole thing in one sitting in about 5 minutes. So I called it Joey. My son with eyes of china blue, troubled mind, but his spirit true. Wanderlust took him across our land, stopping on occasion, playing with or without a band. His violin he could make sing. Listening to him was a beautiful thing. That raggedy young man in his raggedy old clothes often fought battles with imaginary foes. When he lost that last fight, it cost him his life. His imaginary foe had him use a very real knife. Always on my mind, forever in my heart. Joey, my son, you will always be a part of me. I love you.
You said this was influenced by the song Vincent.
Yes.
You could actually, at least the first part of this, sing these lyrics, these words to that. My son of eyes of china blue, trouble mind in his spirit true. It fits the tune.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting that you pointed that out. I had never done that, but I had never seen that before.
Maybe listen to it and then maybe the whole thing matches. But
I do have maybe subconsciously, subliminally that was at work because I know I do have other poems that I can almost sing to another song that I'm familiar with.
yeah.
I've written a couple of poems that have a very Eminem hip hop beat to it. I can imagine singing it in the manner of Eminem, and so
try them out. Even this one, which is sad and yet very beautiful. When we started this interview, I noticed you had a musical note hanging on your neck, and yes, on a chain. And I'm thinking that maybe now I understand it. You want to tell us about it?
It has a little bit of Joey's ashes in it. So I never take it off. I shower with it. I fight with the doctors if I have to go to the hospital for things. And even through airport security, they can't make me take this off.
Well, in wrapping up, I can't thank you enough, Mark. This has just been absolutely brilliant. We have more of Mark's poems that we'll be putting in the notes. Will refer where you can get those. We'll have it on our blog post on Alzheimer Speaks as well, but we'll direct you to exactly where you can read some of his other poetry, and we'll have his pictures and things in the art gallery as well. And we really encourage people to share this, to inspire people, to give them hope. And I hope that you enjoyed our conversation, as we explored Mark's art. For me, it was really emotional at times, but that's the beauty of art, and so, some people will go, "What's she crying about? Why doesn't she cut that out?" And it's like, because that's real life. That's what art does, and it's okay, I think, to have emotions. And there'll be people that disagree with that. That's fine. But I think art is such a powerful medium, not only for those of us that are viewing or taking it in, but for the creators as well. I just think it's so healing. So thank you very much. Mary, any last comments from you?
I agree. We can release our emotions through art and, of course, through tears. Mm-hmm. It's a way to do this. As always, Mark and Lori, I learned from our guests. I've learned about photography. I've learned many things in this conversation. And I hope that if you're listening, that you will take some of these ideas with you and know that art can help us to thrive in life.
Exactly. And you had mentioned the tears, but we also mentioned about the peacefulness, the calmness, the joy. It's all of those things and what you read in and what you see from, what is before us, and having the patience, like one of his poems says, to just see and really take in what's before you. Mark, any last comments from you?
Well, I want to thank you both for inviting me on and allowing me to share my photography and share my thoughts through my poetry with you, and to allow me to talk about my son, because even as recent as last night, I had somebody comment to me that started talking about my son and then apologize for talking about him because he's passed. And the way I look at it is, as long as we're still talking about Joey, he's still alive.
Yep.
And so I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to not only talk about the art, but also to talk about my son.
Yep. Well, what a powerful man that he was, and the impact that he's had and still carrying on through your voice and your advocacy, which, I think we all need to jump on that bandwagon of mental health. It's important. We can't just push it away or move people off the street and pretend like this doesn't exist. It does.
Just like with, dementia, the big stigma living with dementia, there's just as difficult stigmas living with mental illness. And, people need to know that it's okay not to feel okay, that it's okay to talk about mental health, and to, remember that mental health is health, and there's no shame in needing help.
Exactly.
And I would like to say to you, Mark, keep making your art, but you know what? I don't think I need to say that, because it looks like you can't help yourself. And I love that. I love that. You're an inspiration to all.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
And again, I want to thank our partners. Again, like, click, and share, spread the word. There is hope abound all over. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey everybody, Jared Sebestier, host of Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. Few people could just flip the switch from working a career 30 or 40 plus years, retiring on Friday, without methodical steps to living what we call a repurposed retirement. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.